Hello, Andressa, and welcome to the Design System Guide podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. And a little story how we met. Actually, you were the one that recorded a short video for Into Design Systems conference, and there was still the founder and also my design system guide at that time. And it feels like it was a century ago. Because then when we met in person, we immediately clicked, and I really like whatever you're doing and also your personality. So I'm even more excited to have you here on this podcast. So I would start with first question, and can you introduce yourself, because you have so many experience and you're right from design systems and from design is quite crazy.
Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, it's great because we obviously know each other and we work together into design systems. But I am beyond anything a huge fan of you and all the content that you put out. I was a fan even before we met, and then more so after we met because for those of you that don't know, Romina is also a comedian. She is hilarious. But yeah, it's right. I used to create, I like to introduce myself as I work as a design system lead. I also teach design systems memorizely, which most people recognize it from Superfast. And I also host, and now I'm doing kind of some work on the behind the scenes as well of Into Design Systems. And I also used to introduce myself as the odd time content creator because I used to create videos for mostly Instagram and LinkedIn for Memorizely, all content around product design and design systems. And in one of them was like the three best resources in design systems, and it was Into Design Systems, the design system guide, and the third one I don't even remember, and it doesn't matter because these are the two best ones anyways. Yeah, that's a little bit about me, a very big design systems enthusiast.
But you started, your experiences are quite crazy because you moved from Brazil to Italy, you studied there, and then you also moved to Ireland. And I imagine that was quite hard because going abroad, changing the language, learning about design, about new culture, and then also moving to another country is quite huge, I would feel.
Yeah, it was never anything planned. It just sort of happened. I never really planned to like move here permanently, or I did. Or it was one of my passions as well is like traveling or experiencing new cultures. So definitely, studying in Italy was a great experience. I actually studied industrial design, so that is my background. So a lot of the technical learnings that I have had in industrial design now, it's very much applied to my work in design systems. But so was, when you are learning about designing a physical product, you have to consider ergonomics and human factors and human to computer interaction. So there is lots of it that you learn on that also applies and transfers directly into UX. But yeah, I went to uni in Italy and then came to Ireland just to do a course. Ended up getting a job, my first kind of like product design job, but it wasn't really at that time. It was called digital design because I am 100 years old. So yeah, digital design, and it was just kind of like how I stayed. It was just all sort of happening, but then a few years into kind of being a generalist, generalist design, but like mostly designing websites and some applications as well. I had the opportunity to work on this project, which was like a huge amalgamation of 80 services into one platform for the health system of Ireland. And that is I guess, my first contact with design systems because I had to create kind of like, they couldn't rebuild 3D complete every single time. Like they couldn't just create that with like a CMS system or something like that. I needed to be like patterns, right, that could be reused over and over again. So I designed that pattern library, if you will, not even knowing it was a pattern library at the time. And I was like, and then I started researching, and I was like, oh, hang on, that's actually a thing, this design systems, system thinking, this halfway between design and engineering. And I was like, oh, I think this is what I really like to do. So from that point onwards, I decided that like my next career move was always going to be in design systems, even though there wasn't like a specific market for that then back then, when, as much as there is now. That is a little bit of my journey. You mentioned like it must have been hard, but at the same time, that's what I like. That's very like what excites me, learning a new language, learning a new culture. But obviously it's not as comfortable as if you would be doing that in your native language or in your, home country or anything like that.
Yeah, do you think the connection with industrial design is actually that you have to respect specific rules and then you can be creative inside those guardrails, let's say it like that? Because design systems is quite similar in that way.
Yeah, definitely. For sure, technical drawing is very different than creative drawing, and that's something I learned very early on when I started industrial design. You have to kind of like choose your career when you're, well, not that you have to, but it's the way that normally goes. You finish school at 17, and then you have to pick what you want to do in uni. I just thought that, I always liked creative things. Thought it was for me. I was like, oh, this sounds good. Like designing and creating products sounds amazing. But you absolutely have no idea how technical it is until you start studying it. But I think there is a lot of crossover in what I've learned. I never really worked as an industrial designer, but yeah, there is a lot of the learnings from that applies directly. And then I think system thinking as well applies to so many areas of design, if you can think that way.
Would you say that it was a lot of experimentation, that you moved from graphic design and you're learning your own skills, your own style, and then moving to design systems?
Yeah, at the same time, I feel like it is quite a natural path that a lot of designers follow, going from graphic design. I worked then as a graphic designer for maybe like less than 2 years, and then moved to like digital only. Then UX and UI started to become more popular, and then I was like, okay, you actually have to be testing these things with people. Imagine user feedback. Okay, you have to be designing for the user. And then from that, but what I really liked, I always, from very early days of my career, I always enjoyed working with engineers. I always worked really closely. I always wanted to know what was, the best way I could design in the way that was feasible technically. I always wanted to know, how do I communicate this in your language? Because I want to make things easier. When I found out that there is actually this career, I didn't want to be a designer who codes. That's not really it. I enjoyed that, but that's not what I wanted. So when I started in this project that, shaped up to be a design system project, a hybrid between design and engineering, but also operations, that all really appealed to me. So that's when I found, okay, I think this is my niche. But yeah, I guess you could say that there was a lot of experimentation, but also lots of things that I learned along the way that now I can apply to the work I do as a design system practitioner.
Yeah, definitely. And you have both. So you mentioned that you're also teaching. So I feel that's the best combination, that you have a job or projects or clients that you can work with. And then on the other hand, you can transfer all this knowledge with students, but they also give you some kind of motivation and inspiration, even questions, from their own perspective that pushes you forward.
100%, yeah. When I started teaching, I got asked a lot by friends, colleagues, wouldn't, because they know I'm very passionate about teaching as well. So I got asked all the time, would you do this full time? And I never thought that I could bring as much value to students, to teaching, if I wasn't, ingrained in the industry, because a lot of the questions that I get asked, yeah, they could be technical questions, but that's a smaller percentage. The majority of it is how do I handle this situation? And I feel, there's lots of human side of, there's a lot of human side or communication and people relationship in design systems, into working in design systems, that I wouldn't have, much to share if I wasn't experiencing that myself. And to your point, from what I learned from students, it's huge as well, because because you work with design systems, you've been working with design systems for a long time, and you also consult in different types of industries or businesses. So you know that if you are focused on one particular industry, that doesn't necessarily give you, you might know certain repeatable strategies or techniques that you used before in one design system to the next. However, each case is so different. Like, it changes so much depending on the industry, depending on the team size, the scale or complexity of the design system. So a lot of the questions that I get asked from students give me different perspectives and things that I have to find out about, or that I, exchange that experience with them as well. So for me, I really enjoy that as well.
Okay, we started with more broad questions, but I think it's a good segue to the first question about design systems. Can you walk us through the current state of design system you were involved with? And what was the journey? Did you join when they already had a design system, or you just started from scratch and build it?
No, it was very much from scratch. So the current state is in evolution, I would say. So my journey started, I joined Teamwork with the mission of starting the design system practice, and I will be saying practice a lot of the time, because that's how I like to think about design systems, not just as an asset but as a practice, a changing culture within a organization. So they, this is what I was told as part of the interview process, that they attempted to have a design system practice 3 times before, and they failed. But they recognized that they really needed, for many reasons. The company was scaling, the product was scaling, and there is always kind of like an awareness, or from how much of a hot topic design systems are. So they, like, we need this, we know we need this, we don't know why or how, but we need this. So I was hired in with two main goals. First was to establish the design system at teamwork.com, and then the second was to raise the bar of the UI quality. So for a very long time, the company and the product was solely built by engineers. Then design was brought in. Well, that was way, way before my time, so I don't even know what it looked like back then. But then they brought in designs, and then there was multiple product teams, and each designer working on each team. And then with that, everyone, the quality of the design or the output of the product was raising, but in a very inconsistent way. Each designer was adding some polish to their own area, but as a whole, the product was starting to get a little bit or a lot bit inconsistent. So I was brought with that mission. But
you. It was not the intention that they already hire a team, but it was you, and then you start with hiring.
Exactly. So I was first approached by this company to interview for a product designer, like a senior product designer role, to which I just declined. I just said, I'm actually not really, I'm focusing solely on design systems now. And then they approached me again. They're like, oh, actually, no, we do need someone with design system experience. But no, there wasn't any dedicated team, not even anyone owning. There wasn't anything in place. So, which you might think it is like an easier job if you're starting from scratch. However, the product already existed for many years. So there's a lot of legacy, a lot of, 2, then 3 different code bases. So my first challenge, I suppose it was that we needed a dedicated team and to get resources and get support and buy-in to stand up an independent team. So when I joined, I was actually part of the front-end engineering team. So it was just like a front-end infrastructure team. It was myself and 14 15 engineers, but they weren't solely dedicated to this project or anything like that. So I would say that a lot of my work at the start was I had to put a business hat on, and come up with first do all the understanding what the problem was, why it failed before, what do we have in place, and also get familiar with the product. It's very complex, and there is a lot of products as well, not a single one, but the one that was, I guess, the main focus for the business is the more complex one, which is the project management, client management side of the product. So I needed to understand. So I, conducted multiple different interviews with engineers, with designers, with stakeholders, with senior leadership, PMs. I've chatted to everyone, and by collating all that data, I then listed all the opportunities, framed the problems as opportunities, and then again worked with senior leadership to help me prioritize all the steps everything that needed to be done, but in a way that made sense for the business, So that's what I mean about I had to put my business hat on and do a lot more of that work than I had to have done in previous experiences. So the initial team, once I've proved, I had a plan, a very rough roadmap for the first 3, 6, and 12 months. I had this matrix that I came up with to prioritize the work and then extract the action items. And then I basically mentioned, in order for this to be viable, we need a team, like a dedicated team. How many resources can you give me? And I then basically outlined the 2 ways that we could go about it. We could go with a centralized team, and we could go in a hybrid model, a hybrid between centralized and federated team. And all of this means a lot to us because we work in design systems and we know what that means. Senior stakeholders, senior leadership, it doesn't resonate with them, this type of term. So you really need to tailor your language and the way you speak. So what is, why it matters, and how. It's the what and how and why that you have to explain more so than these terms, federated model, centralized model, hybrid model. But I basically gave them 2 options. This is what is and why it matters and how we're going to do it and what are the consequences if we don't do it this way, and the same for the other model. And then they for the reality of the business and the state of having no design system, no library, nothing being reused, they opted for the hybrid model that would, from their perspective, we just had too many product teams that if it was a centralized team with very little resource, it was going to create a bottleneck, which I agree. It would have been the way to accelerate building a library because it's, from scratch. So yeah, we basically went with the hybrid model. So the initial team was myself, another principal engineer, and then a designer, which was only 50% of the time. Perhaps 50% of the time dedicated to the team. With 3 months on, we got more resources. So we then got a team lead, which I feel like it varies from organization to organization. In this organization, a team lead would be leading engineers within the team and another 2 engineers, I believe. That's when things really took off, when we got more engineers on board, and then everyone was dedicated. So very soon we had a team of 5, which I think at that time it still felt like small. However, watching different interviews, learning more about the industry or even reading the design system report that Zero Height put out, I can see that that's actually amazing in terms of, even compared to with the scale of the company, to have a team of dedicated, even 5 people, it was a lot at that time. But yeah, everyone was very passionate. Sorry.
So when 3 months, you mentioned that you hired more, but was that the time that you already got or made components that they joined?
Yes, we were. So one thing that for that system to operate or to actually work, working in a hybrid model, getting contributions from different teams, there was a lot that needed to be in place in order for that to work. And one of those things is a very clear process on how that contribution happens. That's one of the things. And then the second thing was education, because just because you are an engineer or just because you're a designer, a product designer, product engineer, doesn't automatically make you able to contribute a component, a design system component, but also it's not an out of the world skill that nobody can learn, everyone can learn. So there was this huge piece of trying to get adoption more in the sense of not of people using it, but people contributing to it, because that's what we needed. We needed more hands on deck to contribute. A lot of it even from the engineering side. So at that stage, we would have had a few components that were built by the team, by the centralized team, which at the time was maybe, one engineer and 1.5 designers, and the few contributions, very, very, very early contributions as well from engineers from other teams. So we had a small number of components, but we had already a good number of advocates. We had already started doing office hours. My approach was very intense with education. So bringing people on board, running multiple workshops. Office hours was weekly at the time, and then we changed it to bi-weekly when, as the system matured. But being in front of people all the time, approaching it from an educator perspective, not a police perspective or the school's principal's perspective, I feel like it made a huge difference. So we had more. Yeah, we didn't have any numbers to show at that stage to ask for more resources, but we had some call data, running surveys with people, already starting to see some of the benefits, which is absolutely almost zero at the start. You have to be very realistic. You're not going to get any efficiency gains or consistency gains in the first 3 months. So you don't have that to show. It's mostly people being excited about it or understanding or wanting to be involved. So I used that and a very solid plan. So I know what I'm doing. This is the strategy. This is what we're going to achieve. These are the milestones that are planned, and that's basically what I used to get more resources. And I just want to mention that they weren't externally hired. There was internal talent that was moved into our team.
But did you write some guides for everyone that wants to contribute to design system when you mentioned educating them? You didn't have, of course you didn't have the time to make all the components by yourself, but that's why I suppose you provided some guidelines for people that want to do that.
Yeah, so what I mentioned about the contribution process having to be really clear if you are going to go that route is, yeah, the onboarding is super important. But one element that I always wanted to make sure that I brought it to the table was not making it very overly formal and overly in the sense of this is what I'm doing and you should follow it. So I've always done it in all of the office hours, all of these guides, they were collaborative, so using a whiteboarding tool such as FigJam or Miro. So I had instead of being a page on a documentation page on the reference site, which we did have afterwards, I had this diagram in FigJam, just saying you start here, I'm a designer, this is where I start my process, this is what I should check for, and this is what I should do at this point, at this check-in. I should do a component breakdown, and then this is when I collaborate or I share with engineering, and then this is from that point onwards, this is what the developer contribution flow looks like, and this is how the QA contribution looks like. So I had it designed initially in the FigJam board, and then after in Workplace, it's called Teamwork Spaces, is one of the products, which is maybe kind of like Confluence if you're not familiar with Teamwork Spaces. So we had it documented there before we had a dedicated design system site. But having that and doing the walkthrough in FigJam with everyone there, following along, giving opportunities to ask questions or to maybe give feedback on the spot, I feel like it makes a difference than you just throwing a document over the fence and, just asking people to follow it, to change the way that they work, but without being there to support them. Yeah,
It's
I
hard.
always made
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I was listening to your interview, the latest one you've released, and I'm gonna do a very bad job because I can't remember his name. Is it Guy? Guy, yeah. He was mentioning something, and I was listening to that, and I agree very much. It's a lot to ask for people to change the way they work. Why would I change the way they work just because you're asking me to? Why will I do what you want me to do? You're not my boss. So my approach to it, and then I completely agree. Like if I'm used to delivering something in a certain way that works and it's efficient, and I'm meeting my deadlines, and I'm delivering the value that the business is asking me, like why will I take an extra step, or why will I contribute? So I've always approached this with, it's everyone's business. It's not something that you're doing for me or for the design system team. It's something that you're doing for yourself. It's for your own team's sake as well. We're all working towards the same goal, which is to deliver a better product and to deliver it in like a more efficient way.
Did you set up some guardrails, for example? In the start, you didn't have so many teams, I would assume, product teams. But when the company grows, you can have a lot of contributions then. And when people contribute, not to say too much, but maybe components that might not fit in design system, are there any rules, or how did you review all these components, to fit certain properties, to apply specific design tokens, etc.?
Yeah, super great question. And I think I didn't fully answer what you asked me before. So I had these diagrams that outlined the process, but I also had templates. So if you were creating documentation on the design site, you had a template that you would follow. And then the process as well for suggesting a new component or a new variant. Also, I had a framework in place, which is for you to take, just to outline first the product needs, and then the second, the user needs, and then any evidence of usability tests if you were trying a version against the other. So that was on the design side. Then on the engineering side, again, what I said, I think a few minutes ago about you, just because you're an engineer and you're obviously very good and talented and capable at what you do, doesn't automatically give you the skill to build a component in a way that can be reused or reconfigured in ways that will suit different contexts of use. So there was education to be done on that side as well. One thing that we did that I found helpful is that if you didn't have any experience, some engineers were more interested and had already, had kind of like educated themselves on maybe the best ways of building design system components. Others not so much. I came up with this exercise, which I called it component blueprint, but yeah, don't quote me on that. I just that's what I called, because it looks like a blueprint of a house, right? Just do it like a sketch session, and this is a collaboration between me and an engineer, not necessarily the engineer that is going to be building it, someone in the design system team. We sketch it together. Okay, should this be a slot? Should this be a prop? We didn't want to be overly prescriptive, because the engineer that is building it can also have their own ideas. But if you didn't, this might be a good guide onto how to think about this in a systematic way, because this engineers contribute, and they're feature engineers, so they're more used to thinking of, I'm building something just for this area of the product. So the component blueprint was one of the ways, and we were also code owners of the design system. So any code that was going to be merged into the design system module had to be reviewed by us.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you don't bloat the system then.
Yeah, not to say that it didn't get bloated. You know, it's not foolproof and it's not perfect. And with the federated model, this is one of the learnings as well that we've had, that it was necessary at that time to build the library from scratch in a short period of time. The quality of, the code quality of a lot of the early days design system components might not be maybe up to the standard, but I feel I wouldn't change the way we approached it. It was needed at the time and it worked at the time, but there are some side effects, such as like bloat in it. Defining whether or not it belongs in the system was still ultimately the decision of the design system team. But yeah, perhaps you wouldn't make those decisions. With the gift of hindsight, maybe some of the components didn't belong in the system. So yeah, it works. It does have side effects though.
Did you keep the system also like now, years after?
In the
The
federated
model, I
model,
mean the model. Yeah.
it's still officially hybrid, yes, but in terms of like contributions of new components, it doesn't happen often at all that we get external contribution with the resources that are in the team now. And you don't have to be building new components all the time. I want to say more on like a governance and maintenance basis. When a component does need to be built, it's generally built by the central team, because now it's just more feasible. It's just not with the same, the demand is not as high as it was when you're building it from scratch. So the one thing that we had very hard guardrails on were tokens and icons. So only the design system team could add new tokens or icons. But the contributions can also come in the form of bug fixing. So in that sense, it's still very much federated. Yeah, when it comes to fixing or maybe improving on certain components, yes.
In which phase then did you introduce the tokens?
From the start as well.
From the start.
Now, I have to say this, it coincided with the app also being migrated to a new code base. So that was it worked in our favor. Anything that was being built new, it was going to be built in this new code base. And then in that way, everything was already tokenized. We didn't retrofit tokens into the legacy areas or old code, because the intention was to migrate the app fully to this new code base with time. But the app is so complex and so robust that 3 years and 2 years on and it's still not fully migrated. So there's still the reality of more than one code base.
Yeah, it's a lot to tackle then. But what do you think, I mean, when you look back, what was the most challenging part of building a design system?
The most challenging, I think there were the big challenges in every phase, I would say. At the very start, as I mentioned, when I joined, they had 3 failed attempts. So there was a lot of skepticism. If people had been there for long enough, they'd be like, why is this going to work? It never worked before. I failed it 3 times. Good luck. So I feel like I started already with the challenge of people not believing that this time could work. And then a lot of so even though I was hired specifically for this role, I still had to do a lot of selling this internally, even to senior leadership, to get the more resources to stand up an independent team. Having the federated model to get people to want and contribute. And then, the challenges in terms of getting people to adopt and use it, I want to say maybe were lesser than the other challenges. I think I invested a lot in creating the sense of community around design systems in the organization. Like communication channels, they were never called design system channel. It was design system community, because the idea is that it's not the central team that holds all the knowledge and all the power, if you will. If, people start learning about it, working with it, so anyone really can answer those questions, or at least try. But so when it came to the adoption on I want to say on the IC level, that was very positive, and I wouldn't say it was a massive challenge, but There's also the challenge once the system is adopted, but it's never finished, right? So you constantly have to be iterating. As much as you iterate in features of your product, you're always iterating on the design systems. Yeah, I feel like you're very easily called out as a blocker by teams if something needs to reuse components rather than build them from scratch or build snowflakes all the time. There is a little bit of a compromise, if you will, in time if something is not ready to be used straight away. If it needs adjusting, if you need a new variant, or if you need to expand the capabilities of the component, there will be a little bit of a waiting time, especially if you are a small team serving a lot of feature teams. But you're often called a blocker. But then I feel like that is also a quick and an easy escape as well. Like if you didn't meet a deadline or something, it's like the easiest thing is to call the design system team a blocker, right? So even though you have that great sense of community when people are pressured with deadlines, with deliverables, they will blame the design system team. So I feel like that's a kind of like an ongoing battle as well, like an ongoing challenge that you have to work with. Yeah, you have to deal with as kind of always.
Yeah, it's always like prioritizing so many tasks, and on the other hand, also teams. What's more important? Which product teams has a better business outcome, or let's say it like that.
Yeah, or like more what's the like absolute priority for the business as well at that time? Which of these high priorities should we focus on? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's always changing, because in 1 year you can make a roadmap and everything looks perfect and you have a plan for what you will change and what kind of new features you will add or new components or just documentation part. But then every quarter something new comes up. Maybe, technology changes, I don't know, the business changes, and it's always a bit of juggling in between.
So true. So true. Yeah, you have everything kind of planned, but you can't predict the unpredictable, and I feel like that happens a lot as well in in product design and design systems for sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned metrics, and you also mentioned that you still had to sell the design system internally, but did the presentation changed? So probably in the start it was more like a pitch, and then you moved to to different metrics. Maybe did you measure the design system adoption, or what was the process later on?
Very good question. So, and I feel like people are less realistic about it. Yeah, I with the experience I have is that you should be really realistic with what you can deliver in the period of time, right? So at the very start, I had this roadmap for 3, 6, and 12 months, like very rough roadmap. These are the outcomes. By this mark, I want to have the whole token as infrastructure in place. By this time, I want to have this number of components delivered, and to be honest, that doesn't really mean much to the business, how many components you have built. But what I learned as well is that you always have to have measurable results, no matter what they are, as long as you are working towards an OKR, right? So you have your objectives and you have your key results and they're measurable. At the start, we didn't have any nothing was really baseline, so you couldn't really claim that there was efficiency gains or time saving gains. So I had to rely on number of advocates, for instance. How many advocates or how many adopters have we had? And it was very much manual, coming up with a spreadsheet and a way that I could measure it, but it was mainly me filling that out like manually. There was nothing automated at the start. Maybe office hours attendance was a metric I used at the start as well, to show that it was getting traction. Today, office hours attendance doesn't really mean much. Not that it doesn't mean much, you still want to get engagement. However, it's not a number that you're always looking to grow, at least within our strategy. So everything was very manual at the start. Even if we wanted to show like adoption in code, it was one of our engineers kind of like, scanning a module to see how many design system components were being used for a feature, right? Then we needed to come up with a way that was more reliable. And, once we had a lot of design system components in place and we had token adoption and our like icon system adoption as well, we needed a way of like measuring it that was more accurate. We didn't consider any external tools at the time, to be honest. And then when I say at the time, it's not that long ago, maybe like 2 years ago. I don't think Omelette was around yet. And we didn't use any other design system management tools. We built our own system. We call it not very creatively DS Stats. It is basically, it's a little website that we have. You can go on and it is synced with the code base, and then it's synced with the code base, which means every time that code gets merged, that updates automatically. And there was a few metrics that we came up with. So we wanted to measure, like, most used components, most used, then within those components, what are the most used props and slots. But this is not really a measure of success. It's just, well, actually, how do we define success? When I'm talking about it's what matters to the business, or if I'm presenting to leadership, I'm never going to go to them and say like, this is the most used component and this is the most used prop. That doesn't matter to them. What matters that it's the other part that we came up with in terms of measurements. It's the adoption. So basically measuring the code of what is custom or what's feature code compared to design system code. So that gives you a little percentage, and then you can say, this feature has the highest adoption of 85% design system code. And you do have to apply critical thinking on that, because there might be cases that a feature is not adopting the system, but it's not because they don't want. It's because maybe there is some technical limitations that doesn't let them have 100% of design system code. So you have to take some of it with a grain of salt, but it's way more accurate than it used to be, because before it was really just someone checking the code to see how much adoption there was there. Yeah, we've automated that process by creating our custom tool.
That's amazing work, that you really started from scratch and then you saw the opportunity where you can make the system better, and also, of course, metrics. And I think that's quite impressive, because a lot of teams, they just want everything in the start and then they miss all these little bits that help you to do it.
Yeah.
Not perfectly, because it's always in the works, but at least you follow the rhythm of the team that's also growing.
Yeah. I think different metrics make sense at different stages of the maturity of the system, and you have a lot of great content on that. And I remember you had even a community file on adoption on the metrics, definitely on your guides somewhere.
Yeah,
And
it's
you
a
also
list.
you also speak about all the different types of metrics that you can have, because I don't think there is a single metric that makes sense to every single team or to every single product. So, and also at different stages. So at the start, all we could measure was how much engagement we have, how we could do surveys and test how well the new ways of working were being received, how teams were finding it. So you can rely on a lot more qualitative data at the start. And then once you have more resources, or you have a larger library, you have more adoption, then you can start measuring code and design adoption there through design system components and pattern adoption.
Exactly. I mean, you don't even have the data before, so.
Yeah. But I think it's super important to be realistic about that. When you're pitching, like you said at the start, not to promise the world, because you're not going to be able to show return of investment in the first 3 months. Well, I don't know, maybe if you have 50 people who are dedicated to the design system, if you're thinking about multiple product teams, a complex product, it's just not realistic.
Yeah, also in the first year, it's hard to expect something. I mean, yes, design-wise, of course, but also the investment is quite high.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I said 3 months because I was being generous, but it is really the first year you can't really,
Yeah.
expect
Also, the opportunity costs that we never mentioned are high, because whenever designer starts with design system, I mean, if they are pulled from the internal teams, then they cannot work on the projects. And I
Exactly.
see a lot of this issue. I mean, not issue, it's a challenge actually for businesses, that they understand that this work will pay itself and it will be even scalable. But when they start, of course, then the business lacks some features or it takes more time. And that's why it's hard to move with design system or faster. Yeah. Did you also use some kind of automation or AI tools for anything in the phase of creating design system?
Well, I think the most automation that we've gotten was with the tool that we built to measure the metrics,
Mm-hmm.
adoption. That was, again, I guess as far as automation that we've gone, when you are building a design system from scratch, you're establishing the practice. I feel it takes longer for you to have time and be able to prioritize innovation. So to this date, we haven't explored anything on the AI space other than, leveraging AI for like documentation. Yeah, to I don't know, some sort of automated testing, but nothing like not a dedicated tool for that. So just availing of what is already out there, and the custom sync as well that we'll have to build to build in this like token migration that we have programmed as well. But yeah, I think our pride and joy is the design system stats. Is that also it's not just to kind of like see what's being used the most just to have a number to work on the back of it, but we use that all the time as well to see, because there is a breakdown of the app. I'll give you an example. The app, there a lot of like features of the app are table based. So we have like a very, I think one of our most complex components is a table. And I think everyone that works in design systems love to hate tables. But that component will say it's used maybe like 91 times. And it's got, I don't know how many props and how many slots and you name it. If we're seeing, for instance, that a certain prop is being used a lot of times, so say the width prop is being overwritten to so many times, we can then, okay, maybe we actually need a variant for that, like a size variant, instead of, if people are having to override that every single time, maybe we can embed some of those capabilities out of the box already. So we use that also as a measure of like success of the component, as in like, is it like the quality of the component and how is it making people's lives. And the other thing is, for also if you're looking to make a change, another component that we use a lot is a date picker. For instance, it's used so many times, and maybe there is some logic that needs to be implemented that depending on the area of the app that it's being used. And you need to assess how that change is going to impact all the areas. So like that, our tool also shows a breakdown of all the areas that are using that. So if you need to run an audit and assess, like, am I going to make this change that is going to impact all the areas? What are the areas that are being impacted by? So it's just super useful, and it's something that had to be really manual again, something that we had to do really manually every single time, to see, okay, this is being used in 5 areas. What are those areas? You literally have to go in each feature module and see and check if it was being used. So it automated a lot on that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great way of adding this feedback also for creating new component or variants. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
where do you see design systems heading in the next, I would say, years, but technology and AI changes so fast that maybe it's in the next few months.
The next few months, yeah. I'm like really interested to see where it's headed. I feel like when you're working in a design system team, you're so kind of like caught up on the day-to-day things that it's when you go to like conferences and meetups, that's when you get like a perspective of, the other day, Marco from the it was showing the Token Studio's graph engine, and you're seeing like, whoa, okay, there's way more capabilities there on that go beyond like tokens, the tokens the way we use. I think it's very clear as day that all the repetitive things or all the like execution work that we do manually today, like component documentation, component specing, that's all automated. So I think there will be some sort of package that you can just install, and like there you have it. That's your whole library that integrates in a way that makes total sense for your product. And it's not just like, using a pre-existing library like today, like Tailwind or whatever, like frameworks. It's going to be way more robust. So the whole like execution and integration part, I feel like it's clear to me that it's going to be automated to the max in the next couple of years. So I think the other part, like the governance and the maintenance more from an operations and even like the education side, perhaps take more of a front seat than it does now. I feel like now there's a lot of focus on the technical side. Not saying, I'm the only person speaking about operations, which is not the case. I listen to a lot of great interviews that you've even conducted and a few more. But I think that when you're thinking of working in design systems, it is going to be more focus on the operation and perhaps on the innovation side as well, like how you can automate even further, like what more can you automate or how much further you can go using AI, for instance, for everything. That might be the near future. I'm not even thinking in like 5 years time, maybe like maybe 5 years time.
Yeah, or even before. I mean, probably enterprises will be faster in this case because they have more data, more resources, and way easier to implement. But I definitely agree that we will not customize some random libraries anymore, or like people do, patch components from different UI kits.
Yeah.
So what's one piece of advice that you would give anyone that wants to start in design systems and is currently doing some other job, or maybe they are in the product design, but they would love to start with design system?
Very good question. I love that question. I think you have to be really passionate about design systems. I think it's good to understand that there's more to design systems than the technical knowledge. It's a good idea to invest in soft skills and thinking more diplomatic. I think there's a lot to be said in the people relationships. So investing, getting allies, getting advocates and champions. So just being very good at creating components in Figma. It's not all that there is when it comes to design systems. So I would say also think about upskilling in strategy and like applying the system thinking, not just to the technical side, but to how you communicate as well. And I think so. Maybe invest in the art of diplomacy, learning soft skills on that side as well.
I love this because I never thought it from this perspective. But it is a lot of talking, actually. A lot of interviews already in the start. You have to conduct them, you have to analyze them, and then more talking, as you mentioned in the start, because you have to educate people and also really listen to their feedback. Not just, yeah, okay, we will do it how we think it's good.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people approach, which I understand to an extent, you have to be a little bit, I don't want to say rigid, but you have to be very clear with certain guidelines and guardrails. But I would never approach being in a design system team and trying to communicate how other people should be using it from a police perspective. I'm the police, and you do as I say. Otherwise, you're going to be disciplined. I always like to approach it from an education perspective, because if you're some of the people, if they don't want to adopt it, it might not be just because they're being not nice or because they're being difficult. It might come from a place of knowledge gap. So I would always approach as, you're the educator, not the police.
Yeah, and on the other hand, you're also uplifting their work and optimizing, So this is your job, not something that like you mentioned, you have to do it and that's the only way, and we are the bosses above you.
Exactly. That's not going to get you very far, to be honest.
So we already mentioned that you're teaching at Memorizely, and we can link to your course there, but I would like to ask you, what are you doing when you're not in design systems?
Very little, because I work full time as a design system lead, and then I also teach design systems, and I also host conferences and meetups in design systems. Oh, I do. Yeah, I love to travel. I'm traveling all the time. I'm more of a maybe like I really enjoy learning about like new cultures. I really like city breaks. I really like visiting cities. And what I like to also learn about the cities if they have a good bakery. Big fan of bakeries. Good bakery, good pastry, and good coffee will be my hobbies.
What's your
Also,
favorite pastry?
it's a cinnamon roll, cinnamon bun or
Mine
cinnamon roll.
too.
Is
I
it?
can
No
make them
way.
now that I know. I can make you and bring them to Vienna.
Yes, please.
That's my favorite one, and also my son's, so we make them a lot of times.
My goodness. Oh, I can't wait.
But probably you tried them in Denmark, or where did you had your best one?
I think maybe in Sweden, maybe in Stockholm, but
Sweden.
also in Denmark. Yeah, in Copenhagen, I also had pretty good ones there. Yeah,
Because
they
do you like the ones that have this sugar coating or without that?
prefer without it, I think. But like, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
me
say no.
too.
I prefer without it. Yeah.
It can be too sweet, yeah. I mean, at least in Europe, also Austria, Slovenia, we have some cinnamon buns, but they are never with this sugar coating. But I know that Scandinavian countries, they all do this sugar coating.
Yeah, the ones I had in Copenhagen, not as much. And then in Sweden, they have like those sugar flakes that are like quite square, like they're dotted around, but
Aha.
it's not that glaze.
Ah, okay.
So I'm okay with that. The glazing is a bit too much, yeah.
And what was your, or what is your favorite city?
I can't, you're gonna get me in trouble, Romina. I can't pick favorites.
Ah, okay.
No, I think it's up there between Copenhagen and Berlin. I really love Berlin as well.
I mean, the vibe is quite similar, right? I mean, young people, relaxed environment.
Yeah, I think there is a good like art scene as well
Yeah.
in both countries. Copenhagen is very much like design driven. Like everything is so beautifully designed. Even if you go to like a corner shop, it seems like everyone is born a graphic designer in like Denmark because everything is just so beautifully designed. And Berlin, I really like that there is so much like culture going on, like art, photography, movies. I'm not really into the techno scene. That's not me. That's not my part of Berlin.
Yeah, and diversity in both.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Definitely much more so in Berlin for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I love both cities. So I also
What's
love the
your
fact
what's
that, I mean, I would also put Copenhagen quite high on the list.
nice? Yeah, you
I
can't
went
beat
there.
it because of the pastries.
Yeah, but I also love all the bread stuff. Yeah. I mean, probably this is part of our culture because all these countries are big in bread, and yeah,
Yeah,
really nice. So yeah, looking forward to Vienna and cinnamon buns.
same. Now even more.
Andressa, thank you so much for taking the time and really going so in details, because I'm sure a lot of people will learn a lot and implement this workflow in their in design system, or maybe in version 2, or maybe they can just refine their process. It will be very useful.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was great fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you.